In this video, I'll explain the end focus principle. What is the end focus principle? Well, the best way to understand this is by looking at how it works in text. I'll show you two texts in a moment. For each one, I'd like you to give them a rating of 1 to 10, where 1 is a text which is very difficult to read, and 10 is a text which is very easy to read. Here is text 1. Pause the video, read the text, and give it a rating. Okay, and now text 2. Pause the video, read it, and give it a rating. Alright, having read the texts, you'll almost certainly have preferred text 2. It's much easier to read. The question is why, given that the content of the two texts is almost identical? Well, this is where the end focus principle comes in. When we're reading a text, we'll be reading part of a sentence only at any given point in time. Everything which we have read previously is a way of orienting our understanding of the current sentence. So anything which has come before is context or given information. Anything which hasn't been read yet is then going to be unfamiliar information or new information that we still need to read in order to understand the text further. And if we think about the sentence we're reading, it's then logical that information at the beginning of the sentence is going to be more likely to be given information, whereas information at the end of the sentence, which we have not read yet, is more likely to be new information. And this leads us to a simple principle, namely that we should place new information towards the end of the sentence. This is the end focus principle. And a corollary of this is that we should make sure that the beginning of the sentence orients the reader to given information or information which we already understand. How does this work in practice? Well, here's a simple example. I have a sister. Her name? Well, in the end of this sentence, you would probably expect my sister's name, or possibly some comment on that name. But the options are fairly limited. The beginning of the second sentence, her name, orients us pretty clearly towards given information, namely that I have a sister. Contrast that with example 2. I have a sister, Laura. Well, you might expect this to be my sister's name, but equally you might not. And why? Well, in this example, the second sentence begins with the new information. So there's no way for the reader to clearly integrate Laura into the first sentence. She may be my sister, but she also may not be. So 1 uses the end focus principle successfully here, but 2 does not. So as we read a text, we go from sentence to sentence. At the beginning of the sentence, we'll typically have given information, and at the end of the sentence, new information. Let's look again at our caffeine example. Caffeine is a central nervous system stimulant. It's the world's most widely used psychoactive drug, and it's legal and unregulated. Notice then that it in the second and the third sentence refers backwards to caffeine in the first sentence. So in this case, the given information in the second and third sentence links to given information in the first sentence. This is one pattern you might encounter, but it's not the only one. For example, the most prominent function of caffeine is that it blocks adenosine, an organic compound which induces drowsiness. This drowsiness is necessary for the onset of sleep. In this case, in the first line, the blocking of adenosine then becomes the given information in the next sentence. That is, adenosine is an organic compound. And the inducing of drowsiness at the end of the sentence then becomes the given information in the third line. So here, the new information becomes old by the beginning of the next sentence. And that means that the new information is then becoming the given information of the next sentence. Notice as well, in the first sentence, that the end focus principle can occur not only between sentences, but also within parts of the same sentence. So these are the two patterns which you can encounter. Typically, though, we don't tend to encounter them independently of each other. They'll also be used together in the same text, depending on what you want to say. Let's go back to the two texts from earlier. This was the preferred text, the one which was easier to read. Stop the video now and see if you can find the links backward at the beginning of each new sentence to caffeine. Okay, having done that, these are the links backward, highlighted in red. Notice that in the third sentence, unlike many other psychoactive substances, this does link backward. Even though it's referring to unknown psychoactive substances, we can still integrate that with our understanding of the text because we know the text is talking about psychoactive drugs. Later on, we talk about several known mechanisms of action, and although this is a kind of new information, it's at the beginning of the sentence because we know we're talking about caffeine, which is a central nervous system stimulant, so it's reasonable to expect that the text will have something to do with how these stimulants work. And in the sentence that follows, the most prominent can then be linked clearly back to those mechanisms of action being referred to in the previous sentence. Okay, now try this with the poor text. Pause the video and see if you can find the links backward in the first couple of sentences. All right, it very quickly becomes clear why this text is problematic. In the first sentence, the old information, or the given information, would orient us towards the central nervous system. In the next sentence, the information then orients us in a different direction, towards the world's most widely consumed psychoactive drug. And in the third sentence, we're then taken to nearly all parts of the world. In other words, the supposed given information is not orienting us to the overall theme of this text, which is caffeine. So it's very difficult for us to gain a coherent understanding of how the text works. So this is the end focus principle. Just to recap, place new information towards the end of the sentence, and make sure that the beginning of the sentence orients the reader to given information.